I was elected to the Housing Board of Review last October. When I arrived there, the board was composed of 2 landlords and a banker. I received a rather cold welcome. They expected me to be obsequious to the landlords and immediately criticized me when I expressed a concern that the tenants be treated fairly, pretending that I was biased in favor of the tenants. Since then, a dog walker has been added to the board, but the heavy landlord bias remains, and I am frequently outvoted when I try to protect, and especially when I try to protect a tenant's interests. A large proportion of the voters in Burlington, and especially in Ward 3, rent their homes. Can the City Council do anything more to protect them from predatory landlords?
Well, I think that question raises 2 things that I think Burlington can do better. And one is specifically around the Housing Board of Review and actually any city commission. I don't think there's enough balance of citizens on those commissions and department boards that really represent all of Burlington. Because when I was first on, when we first did the first appointments for the first round of commission seats I think it happens in May or June every year, I was pretty surprised how many people were not from Ward 2 or 3 on the whole list of these boards and commissions, because these board and commissions really have a lot of responsibility and a lot of impact on kind of the day-to-day operations of departments and decisions that city government makes. And for the Housing Board of Review, that is so specifically around housing and tenants and landlord issues that to have only really 1 voice, or maybe 2 now, that are really kind of from the tenant's perspective, that's troubling, because when you look in Wards 2 and 3, we have a high number of renters in this city, especially in those neighborhoods. So I think the reality, though, is we don't get enough applicants to really fill out, I think, these commissions and boards. And certainly, I was trying last year to work with my other fellow councilors, Clarence Davis and Marissa Caldwell, to really do a lot more outreach to the community to say, hey, these positions come up annually, but then there's also vacancies throughout the year, and we need to constantly have this list of people who are at least interested, so that when this happens, we can let you know when the deadline is, we can let you know how to apply and what you need to be on the board, because really you just need to be, for most of these boards and commissions, just a citizen of Burlington. So if we don't get enough options, then all you get is kind of a heavy-ended board that's full of landlords, because those are the people applying to be appointed. So that is definitely some area that I want us to work more on. I don't think we have nearly enough tenant perspectives on the Housing Board of Review, but certainly just Old North End perspectives on any of these boards and commissions. And then the other quick thing just on landlords, you know, Burlington has some really great landlords and they have some really bad landlords, and we have some very small enterprise kind of landlords who either live in the other side of the duplex or maybe own 1 other building or 2 other buildings in Burlington. And then we have these huge landlords. And unfortunately, we have the same rules and structures for all the landlords out there. And I would be really interested in knowing how we can really explore in legal ways kind of having different categories. Because a landlord that owns, you know, 100+ different units throughout the city is not nearly going to take a fine of, you know, $100 or $200 for something that was maybe a code violation in one of their apartments nearly as seriously as, you know, a landlord who owns 1 apartment and is, you know, on site and whatnot. So I just feel like we have the same structure but 2 completely different ends of the spectrums, and it encourages sort of the big landlords who are not so great at being a landlord to really get away with things, because they don't have to, you know, worry so much about these fines. They're minor to them with how much income comes in through their landlord, through their property revenue. So there's more that we can do, and I think we need to send a strong message that predatory landlords are not acceptable. That this is something that you know, doesn't really fit into our community, and we don't want to perpetuate or allow these landlords to continue to make money off of working people if they're not going to really abide by our laws and code in Burlington.
As a lawyer in New York, I practiced landlord-tenant law, and in the New York law, there is a distinction between houses, owner-occupied tenancies, and houses that have fewer than 4 units and houses that have more than 4 units. So the big landlords are not treated the same as the preserve their property by renting out a few rooms. Mm-hmm. But now, as a member of the Housing Board of Review, one of the questions I asked the litigants was, well, how large is your property, and do you live there?
Right.
I thought those were very relevant questions in view of the fact that the law in many states does recognize a difference, as you pointed out, and it's an important difference.
Right.
Well, I was criticized, and the chairman of the board refused to allow me to ask those questions again because she said, well, it's irrelevant whether it's a big multi-million-dollar landlord that doesn't live there or a little homeowner that is renting out an apartment in their home. And
well, it goes again to the point that we need a strong board that's diverse and reflective of, a more neutral body. I mean, the board is supposed to essentially really sift out and make decisions around these housing issues. And if we have a bias or board that leans one way or the other, that doesn't bode well for really kind of balanced decisions that we would hope out of this particular board.
Some of the apartment houses forbid knocking on residents' doors. And in fact, one of the largest is now located in your new ward. Last year, when we did this interview, I asked you about prospects for introducing a bill in the City Council to require apartment buildings to allow their residents to knock on other residents' doors for political purposes, including getting signatures on petitions. If we had such a bill, you could go from apartment to apartment with a resident in each high-rise to meet voters without getting cold. It's quite cold going around door to door outside now. And has there been any progress on this front?
I'm so glad you asked this question again, Terry, because, there hasn't. And again, this is another one of those initiatives that I thought was a really smart idea last year that I would love to see Burlington at least have some discussion about. Because when we talk about having people engaged in city government, and if people are not registered to vote, or if they're not having I think the real service of having candidates come up and ask people if they're registered to vote and if they want a ballot by mail, that's a disservice to those people just because they happen to live in a tall, high-rise building with several units in it, if it's locked to, just to the general public. So I think for the sake of getting people, and there's probably a really common sense way that we can preserve people's privacy and not make it solicitation necessarily, but to make sure that people are getting that added benefit of democracy in action, where they're able to engage with candidates and also have, again, what the services of most candidates do, which is an opportunity to register to vote or to change their address and to get ballots by mail. Because otherwise, those buildings, I'm sure, if you did, it would be interesting to know in those particular buildings what the voter turnout is in each of those particular buildings, and see if there's I'm sure there would be a connection between the fact that they are locked down in terms of candidates being able to get in there every election cycle, and let's say, the street around it. And I think we do, again, a disservice to those folks by not somehow be thinking forwardly about making those buildings more accessible.
That's an issue that's very important to me personally because last year I was a candidate and I was going around with a nominating petition. Yeah, I live at Cathedral Square, which is a 10-story high-rise in the center of Burlington, and we have 108 apartments. And I was criticized for circulating the petition. They forbid me to continue to do it, even though I live there. And I was only asking other tenants to sign my petition. And now this year I'm running again. I'm a candidate for the state senate, and I'm trying to get a petition signed to get me on the ballot in November. But I can't do that where I live. And I would like to go around with you to introduce you to the voters there at where I live. But I can't do that either. So I would really like to see something done about that. The Cathedral Square should not be able to prevent us. I
think buildings in particular that have public funding attached to it, that really, it's one thing if it's a private development and it's like a gate, to me gated communities are problematic in them themselves, but if it's all privately funded and it's private land, that to me is, do what you wish on those particular properties. But properties that have federal or state funding that's attached to it, to me, should be accessible. And it also, to me, it always alarms me when we start locking off different parts of where people live, because I fear people getting further detached from the greater community. That's why gated communities concern me in general, is because people get more removed from, you know, diversity and issues of city life and whatnot. So, you know, let's follow up on that one too, Terry, because I think that's a good issue that should get some more discussion.